He handed her his last dollar, barely enough for a coffee. She didn't look homeless, just tired, like life had taken too much from her. He didn't know her name, her story, or that this single moment of kindness would change everything. Weeks later, a letter arrived, one that would erase every debt, every sleepless night, and every doubt he ever had about doing the right thing. This is the story of how one broke college student changed a stranger's life, and how she gave him everything in return. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The alarm didn't go off. Or maybe it did and he'd already hit snooze without remembering. Either way, Noah Carter jolted upright in bed, heart pounding, cold sweat trickling down his spine. 8:42 a.m. He had an exam at 9. He threw on yesterday's clothes, creased khakis and a hoodie that still smelled faintly of fryer grease, and bolted out the door. His shoes weren't tied. His backpack was half-zipped. He grabbed it anyway and took the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping as he rounded the corner into the lobby of his dorm. Outside, the Chicago wind hit like a slap to the face, sharp, bitter, unforgiving. Noah gritted his teeth and pulled his hoodie tighter around his neck. He could feel the emptiness gnawing at his stomach, a familiar ache that had become something of a second skin. He hadn't eaten since lunch the day before, half a granola bar and a cup of black coffee from the library vending machine. He'd meant to grab dinner after work, but the bus was late. His feet were sore, and by the time he got back to campus, everything was closed. Again. His stomach growled in protest as he jogged across the icy sidewalk toward the student center. Maybe he could grab a banana or something from the food pantry. But he already knew the answer. Tuesdays were restocking days. Nothing left. Not until tomorrow. He checked his phone as he ran. 2 missed texts from his boss at the coffee shop, could he cover a shift tonight? And one from his landlord, need this month's rent, can't hold off anymore. Noah shoved the phone back into his pocket, not even bothering to respond. What could he say? The $13.21 in his bank account wouldn't get him a gallon of gas, let alone half the rent. And that was before the bookstore reminded him about the unpaid lab manual he still needed for bio. He reached the lecture hall with seconds to spare, his chest tight from the run. He slid into the back row, head down, praying the professor wouldn't notice. As he opened his notebook, he realized his pen had run out of ink. Of course it had. Noah sat there, jaw clenched, the weight of everything pressing down at once. Hunger, exhaustion, the constant dread of one more thing going wrong. And yet, somehow he still showed up, still took notes, still believed he could make it. Because failure wasn't an option, not for someone like him. Noah stood in front of the vending machine, staring at the glowing numbers like they might change if he waited long enough. $1, that's all he had. He pulled out the crumpled bill from his hoodie pocket, the edges soft and worn like it had lived in there too long. A single lonely dollar, enough for a granola bar maybe, if the machine didn't reject it like it sometimes did. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled slowly. There was something humiliating about counting change in front of a glass case full of overpriced snacks, especially when people walked by without a second glance, students with iced coffees in hand, headphones in, winter jackets that didn't look like they came from a donation box. Noah didn't resent them, not really. But the difference in worlds felt stark sometimes, loud. He glanced around. No one was looking. Still, he slid the dollar back into his pocket and let the vending machine hum quietly behind him. It wouldn't cover rent, wouldn't get him a notebook or a cup of coffee or the smallest sandwich from the corner deli. It wouldn't buy peace of mind or a seat at the table. But still, he kept it. Not out of hope, not exactly. Out of principle, dignity, like maybe holding on to that last dollar meant he hadn't lost yet. His stomach growled, loud and hollow. He ignored it. Back in his dorm, his roommate wasn't home, probably out getting brunch or studying at the cafe down the street. Noah peeled off his hoodie, sat on the edge of his bed, and pulled out his phone. $1 in his wallet. $13.21 in his account. 2 bills due by Friday. And the only thing in his fridge was a half-used ketchup packet and an expired bottle of almond milk. He swallowed hard, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like the answers might be written there. His jaw clenched, heart heavy. This wasn't new. It was just louder today. He wasn't looking for pity, just a break. Just a moment to breathe without the constant weight of survival pressing against his ribs. But even as everything threatened to crush him, he didn't let go of that dollar. Because sometimes dignity is the last thing you have, and the only thing that keeps you going. The morning wind bit harder than usual as Noah tightened the thin strings of his hoodie and trudged down the slushy sidewalk toward campus. His fingers, stuffed in his pockets, felt like stiff frozen sticks. Snow from the night before had turned to ice around the corners of buildings, and every breath felt like inhaling glass. He walked past the bakery on 12th, its windows fogged with heat and cinnamon, and tried not to look at the fresh croissants lined up in the display. He didn't need temptation. Not when hunger already gnawed at him like a parasite. His stomach had been growling since last night, and no matter how tightly he clenched it, it didn't stop. But it wasn't the hunger that made him stop cold in his tracks. Just before the crosswalk, where the sidewalk dipped near the campus library, a woman sat hunched on the curb, no coat, just a thin, wrinkled cardigan wrapped tight around her. Her knees were drawn to her chest, one heel missing from her worn-out flats. She wasn't asking for money, no cup, no sign, no pitiful glances upward, just her head in her hands shaking, as if the air around her had collapsed and left her there to breathe it all back in alone. Noah slowed. Students passed her like she was a pile of garbage, something uncomfortable and better ignored. He stood there for a second, torn between the voice in his head that said, "Keep walking," and the knot in his chest that tightened with each step he didn't take. He walked over. "Hey, are you okay?" The woman didn't respond at first. Her hands trembled as she slowly lifted her head. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, eyes glassy with the kind of emptiness that didn't come from sleep deprivation. It was deeper than that, like she'd lost something she couldn't name. She started, then stopped. Her lip quivered. I didn't think I'd end up here." Noah's throat tightened. He knew what it felt like to be unraveling, to feel invisible. He reached into his hoodie pocket and wrapped his fingers around the dollar, the only one he had. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he pulled it out. Noah hesitated, the dollar trembling between his fingers. It felt absurd, like offering a thimble of water to someone drowning. But he held it out anyway, stepping closer to the woman on the curb. She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten where she was. Her face was thinner than he'd first thought, cheeks hollow, lips chapped from the cold. Her mascara had bled down her cheeks, a ghost of what might have once been poise. But it was her eyes that hit him hardest, wide, scared, ashamed. She blinked at the crumpled bill in his hand. Then her gaze shifted to the lukewarm coffee in the other. He cleared his throat, offering both. "You look like you need this more than me." She didn't move, didn't even reach for it, just stared at him, confused. "What?" Noah gave a small, awkward smile. "It's not much, but it's what I've got." Her eyes welled again, and she pressed her sleeve to her face, wiping away fresh tears with trembling fingers. I can't take your money. You're just a kid." "I'm 19, he said quietly, "and it's just $1." The wind picked up, tossing her hair across her face. She didn't fix it. He stepped forward, kneeling slightly so they were level. "Look, someone helped me once, when I didn't deserve it, when I was angry and scared and too proud to admit I needed anything. They didn't ask questions. They just showed up." She stared at him like she was trying to remember how to speak. "I'm just passing it forward," he said. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, with a shaking hand, she reached out, not for the coffee, not for the $1, but for his wrist. Just lightly, like she needed to feel someone solid to know this wasn't a dream. Her fingers were ice. I don't even know your name, she whispered. He smiled. Doesn't matter. She took the coffee, then the dollar. And Noah stood up and walked away, unaware that the moment he disappeared into the crowd, she pulled out her phone with trembling hands, dialed a number she'd avoided for months, and whispered, I think I'm ready to come home. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loud might shatter what little she had left to hold on to. Noah nodded, offered one more soft smile, and turned without another word. The coffee still steamed faintly in her hands. The dollar was folded neatly between her fingers like it was made of gold instead of crumpled paper. She watched him walk away with a kind of reverence, like she'd just witnessed something holy. He didn't look back. The sidewalk was crowded now, students heading to class, headphones in, laughter echoing off brick walls, feet slapping against slush. Noah disappeared into them like he'd never been there. Just another backpack. Just another kid with somewhere to be. She stayed frozen on the curb, forgotten by the world again. Except by him. He hadn't pitied her. That was what undid her the most. His eyes hadn't looked down on her. They'd just looked at her. Like she mattered. Like she was real. She clutched the coffee to her chest, her hands shaking so badly that a few drops spilled onto her wrist, burning hot against numb skin. Still, she didn't let go. She couldn't. That warmth, no matter how small, was the first thing she'd felt in days that didn't hurt. People walked past, glancing at her with vague discomfort before averting their eyes. Some looked through her. Most didn't look at all. But she kept her gaze locked on the corner where he'd turned and vanished, as if keeping her eyes on that spot might bring him back, or at least anchor her to the moment. Tears spilled freely now, cutting fresh tracks down skin already raw from the wind. She hadn't meant to end up here, not like this. She had a name, a past, a life. Once. And then a stranger had handed her the last of what he had, with no agenda, no judgment, just quiet grace. She pulled her phone from the inside of her cardigan, hands still trembling, and stared at the screen. One number lit up under Favorites. She hadn't called it in almost a year. She pressed it. A ring, then another, then a voice on the other end. Hello? Her voice cracked. It's me. I need help. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel like a ghost anymore. The email came in at 11:43 p.m., just as Noah was about to shut his laptop and finally rest his eyes. The subject line was blunt. Insufficient funds. Rent payment failed. His chest tightened as he clicked it open, already knowing what it would say. The message was cold, automated, no apology, no humanity. Just a line stating his check had bounced and that the building manager would be in touch by morning. Noah closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling. He didn't even flinch. He was too tired to. The overhead light buzzed faintly, and the room felt colder somehow, like the warmth had slipped out through the cracks in the windows and taken his hope with it. A knock came an hour later. His roommate, Jake, stood in the doorway, hair messy, holding his phone. Dude, the work-study office just sent this out. He handed Noah the screen. Budget cuts. Noah's hours at the library were slashed in half, effective immediately. He sat there for a long moment, the weight of it settling in like concrete. Rent? Gone. Job? Gone. Food? He didn't even have the energy to calculate how long the bag of rice in his closet would last. He didn't ask for this. He had done everything right. Applied early, showed up on time, pulled all-nighters just to stay above water. But none of that mattered now. Jake said something, probably about figuring it out or splitting groceries, but Noah barely heard him. His ears buzzed with static, the kind that comes right before a breakdown. When Jake finally left, he lay back on his mattress, no frame, no sheets, just the mattress and a blanket from the campus clothing drive. The room felt like a cell. He stared at the cracked ceiling, eyes burning but dry. He wanted to cry, but even that felt like a luxury now. For the first time since he got into college, Noah let himself ask the question that had lived in the back of his mind for months. What if I can't do this? And for the first time, He didn't have an answer. No one noticed. Not the professor who called him resilient after a near-perfect midterm. Not the classmates who borrowed his notes and never once asked how he was doing. Not the girl in his study group who laughed at all his jokes but never saw the bruises under his smile. Noah didn't tell anyone. He didn't mention the bounced rent check or the job he lost, or the fact that he hadn't eaten anything solid in 2 days. He just kept going, because stopping would mean falling, and he didn't know if he had the strength to climb back up this time. He started selling off his textbooks one by one. The expensive ones went first, then the ones he needed for classes, but figured he could borrow from the library if he was fast enough. He told himself they were just things. That knowledge didn't come from pages. It came from survival, and no one could take that from him. He picked up odd tutoring gigs, staying up past midnight, helping students who didn't need the money, who left their MacBooks open beside untouched plates of sushi while complaining about the parking fees. He smiled through it, always smiled, always said thank you when they paid him in folded 20s. At night, when his roommate was asleep, Noah would gather his things and head to the library. He told Jake he studied better in silence. In truth, the quiet of that place, the fluorescent lights, the scent of old books and tired ambition, felt safer than the four walls of his room. No questions, no rent, no expectations. He'd find a hidden corner, curl into himself, hoodie pulled tight, headphones in without music, and sleep, or something close to it. No one saw the slow unraveling, not the way he'd count coins at the vending machine and still walk away hungry, not the way his hands shook when he typed, not the way he flinched every time his phone buzzed, half expecting it to be the landlord or another job rejection. The silence wrapped around him like armor. It kept him moving, kept him from falling apart. But even armor cracks under enough pressure. And Noah was starting to splinter. The student lounge buzzed with the sound of microwaves, laughter, and the rustle of chip bags being opened like tiny celebrations. The scent of warm food, greasy pizza, spicy ramen, fresh cafeteria burgers wrapped around Noah like a cruel joke. He sat at the far end of the room, hunched over an empty coffee cup, pretending to type something urgent on his laptop. The screen was blank. "Yo!" a voice called, pulling him back to earth. It was Jordan, classmate, lab partner, maybe the closest thing Noah had to a friend on campus. "I'm heading to the food court. You coming?" Noah hesitated. His stomach clenched on instinct. It was past 2, and he hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. A single slice of dry toast from a dorm mate who didn't ask questions. Jordan was already halfway toward the door, waiting, keys jingling in his hand. "I just ate," Noah lied, forcing a smile that tugged painfully at the corner of his mouth. "You sure?" Jordan raised an eyebrow. "My treat, man. You've been helping me with chem for weeks. Come on." Noah shook his head. "Nah, I'm good. Seriously, thanks, though." Jordan lingered, uncertain, then shrugged. "All right, rain check." Noah watched him leave, the scent of a burger trailing behind someone else who passed. His smile vanished as soon as he was alone again. He pulled his backpack closer, like the closeness of it might offer warmth. Inside there was a folder full of assignments, a half-empty water bottle, and an unopened granola bar he'd been saving for the end of the week. He considered eating it now, then didn't. He told himself it wasn't that bad, that it wouldn't last forever. His eyes drifted out the window to the sidewalk beyond the quad, the same corner, the same patch of street where days ago he'd handed his last $1 and half a cup of coffee to a stranger who looked like she had nothing left. She hadn't asked for anything, just like he didn't now. But the image stayed with him, her face, stunned by kindness. The moment had taken less than a minute, but it hadn't left him. Even now, with an empty plate and a hollow stomach, the memory filled something in him that food couldn't touch. Noah stared at the text for a long time before the words made sense. "Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm dropping the class. Thanks for all your help, you were awesome. Sorry for the short notice." That was it. No call, no warning, Just a message that slammed the door shut on the one thing holding his week together. He reread it, then again, as if the meaning might change the third time around, but it didn't. The tutoring gig was gone. He set his phone down on the desk with slow, deliberate care, like if he moved too fast it might crack under the weight of everything else that was already falling apart. The student had paid him $40 every Tuesday and a Thursday. Enough for groceries. Barely. Enough to survive. Now it was nothing. He leaned back in his chair, stared at the ceiling, and let the silence crawl in around him. The kind of silence that didn't comfort. It mocked. The kind that reminded him how thin the ice really was beneath his feet. Noah had built his entire life here on promises of a better future, of stability, of a chance to finally break the cycle. But those promises came with price tags. And now he was running out of ways to pay them. He opened his fridge out of habit, still empty, closed it again, then checked the pantry. A dented can of beans, a single packet of oatmeal, 2 tea bags. That was it. He did the math in his head. It didn't add up. His throat tightened. There were no more tutoring clients, no hours at the library, no shifts at the cafe. Everything he'd scraped together had evaporated in a matter of days. He picked up his phone, scrolled through contacts, hovered over his mom's number, then locked the screen and put it face down. She didn't need this. She had enough to worry about. And if he told her, it would sound like failure, like all her sacrifices hadn't been enough. Noah sat there, motionless, as the light outside dimmed and the walls of his world closed in a little tighter. And for the first time, he didn't see a way out. The mailbox was wedged at the bottom of the stack, scratched and dented, just like everything else on this campus that no one bothered to fix. Noah twisted the tiny key, expecting the usual. A free magazine he never subscribed to, maybe a leftover campus flyer for a club he didn't have time to join. But there was only one thing inside. A white envelope, clean, uncreased, no return address. Just his name, written on the front in looping, precise handwriting. To Noah Carter. He stared at it for a moment, heart suddenly too loud in his chest. It wasn't the kind of envelope you ignored. It had weight, not physically, emotionally. The kind of weight that made your breath catch without knowing why. He pulled it out and glanced around the mailroom. Empty. Just humming lights and the faint echo of distant footsteps. He turned it over. No seal, just a simple flap tucked neatly inside. No postage stamp. Someone had hand-delivered it. A weird feeling crawled up his spine. Hope, maybe, or fear, pretending to be hope. He sat down on the nearby bench, the envelope resting in his lap. His fingers hovered at the edge of it, hesitant. What if it was bad news? A formal drop notice? A scholarship retraction? Another piece of his world ready to fall apart? But it didn't feel like that. He slipped his thumb under the flap and opened it. Inside was a single check. No note, no explanation. Just his name, printed in clean type at the top. And beneath it, in sharp blue ink, $64,218. His heart stopped. He blinked. Read the number again. Then again. It matched, down to the dollar, the exact amount he owed in tuition. The debt that hung over him like a shadow he could never outrun. The number that kept him up at night and dragged him down during the day. Folded behind the check was a small handwritten card. Because you gave me more than money, you gave me hope. Noah's hands trembled. He looked up from the envelope, eyes wide, chest tight, as if the air itself had thickened around him. He didn't understand what was happening. But in a world that had taken and taken and taken from him, something had finally given back. He didn't move for a full minute, just sat there on the bench, the letter open in his lap, the check trembling between his fingers like it might disappear if he breathed too hard. $64,218. It stared back at him like a lie, like a cruel joke wrapped in beautiful handwriting. His name printed at the top, the college's name at the bottom, and in between, a number that had haunted him every waking hour for the past 3 years, his tuition, all of it, Gone. Paid. Noah read the note again, even though he'd memorized it in seconds. Because you gave me more than money. You gave me hope. E.E. Just that. A single letter. He looked up, eyes scanning the empty mailroom like whoever wrote it might be hiding behind a corner, watching him, waiting for a reaction. But he was alone, and the silence was deafening. 100 thoughts collided in his head all at once. Was this real? Was it legal? Was it some kind of scam? His stomach twisted. His fingers gripped the paper tighter. He stood up too fast and had to steady himself against the wall, heart racing. He ran to the financial aid office like the ground was on fire. The woman at the desk looked up as he burst in, breathless, pale, wide-eyed. I got a check, he said. A big one. I don't know who sent it. I need to know if it's real. She blinked, confused. What's your name? He handed over his student ID, hands still shaking. She tapped at her keyboard, squinting at the screen. Then her eyebrows lifted. Oh, Mr. Carter, yes. Your balance has been cleared as of this morning, payment processed and approved. It's all taken care of. His legs gave out. He sank into the nearest chair, mouth open, but no words came. The woman smiled gently, like she'd seen this before, kids falling apart from the sheer shock of good news after too many hard years. Congratulations, she said. But Noah didn't feel triumphant. He felt overwhelmed, grateful, lost. Because for the first time in forever, the weight that had been suffocating him was gone. And he had no idea who to thank. Noah didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on the edge of his desk like it was radioactive, untouched except for the 20 or so times he'd picked it up, stared at it, reread the note, then set it down again. $64,218. He couldn't stop saying it in his head. It didn't feel like a blessing, not yet. It felt like a trap, a dream someone was going to yank him out of just before he tasted air. By morning, he had made up his mind. He'd return it, all of it, or at least get to the bottom of who sent it and why. Because this wasn't how life worked, not for people like him. Strangers didn't just hand you salvation, not without a catch. He walked into the bursar's office with the envelope clutched so tightly in his hand that the edges were bent. The receptionist looked up and offered a polite smile. I need to speak to someone about a donation, he said carefully, his voice lower than usual. He felt like if he spoke too loud, someone might hear him and rip the check away. She typed for a moment, then waved him toward an office in the back. A tall man in a blazer met him with a firm handshake and a curious tilt of his head. You're Noah Carter? Noah nodded. I got this. He held out the envelope like it was something poisonous. I didn't ask for it. I don't know who sent it. I think it might be a mistake. The man opened it deep, glanced at the check, then smiled like this was routine. Ah, yes. We processed that yesterday. Completely legitimate. But how? Who? Noah's voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. No one I know has that kind of money. The man shrugged. They requested anonymity. We don't have any other information, I'm afraid. Noah sat in the chair, stunned. The walls felt closer, the room too quiet. He'd spent so long fighting, scraping, surviving, and now, just like that, the mountain was gone. He left the office in a daze, the envelope still in his hand, heart pounding in his ears. A part of him wanted to celebrate, scream, collapse from the relief. But another part, the louder part, was still whispering the same question over and over. Why me? Noah skipped his afternoon classes and spent the rest of the day retracing every step he'd taken that morning at the crosswalk. He stood at the exact corner where he'd first seen her, where she'd sat, hunched and trembling, no sign or cup. Just pain leaking from her posture, like smoke. The spot was empty now, just cracked concrete and the faint smell of exhaust. He scanned the area for cameras. There were a few above the bookstore awning, another near the library entrance across the street. He ducked inside the bookstore and asked if they had surveillance. The cashier blinked, disinterested. Yeah, but we don't pull it unless there's been a theft. It's important, Noah pressed. I'm trying to find someone. A woman, the cashier shrugged. Can't help you, man. He left, heart pounding, unsure what he even hoped to find. A clue, a name, a face on a campus filled with strangers. He asked around, professors, students, maintenance workers. He described her, mid-30s maybe, a pale skin, brown hair pulled back, wearing a cardigan in the freezing cold. Some shook their heads. Others didn't even listen. No one knew her. No one had seen her. It was like she'd evaporated after their brief exchange. He even checked the campus lost and found and local shelters, just in case. But every road he followed turned to dust. No one remembered a woman sitting there. No one remembered him handing her anything. The moment had existed only for them, and now, not even that. Back in his dorm, Noah sat on the edge of his bed, the check and letter unfolded in front of him like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Just one initial, E. It could have stood for anything. Emma, Elaine, Eleanor. Maybe it wasn't even her real name. Maybe she hadn't wanted to be found. But why him? Why his life? He thought of her face again, the way her eyes had filled when he offered her that last $1, like she hadn't been seen in a long, long time. Maybe that was the answer. He saw her. And somehow she never forgot. For the first time in months, Noah didn't wake up with his heart in his throat. There was no overdue rent breathing down his neck, no mental math of hours to work versus hours to study, no counting quarters to see if he could afford a cup of coffee. The weight that had pressed into his ribs every day since freshman year, the one that had made every breath feel like a struggle, was just gone. He wasn't rich. He wasn't suddenly living in luxury. But he wasn't drowning anymore, and that changed everything. He started sleeping again. Not the 3-hour survival naps in the library chair or the restless tossing on his mattress, but real, deep sleep. The kind that stitched broken thoughts back together. He stopped jumping awake every morning in a panic, convinced he'd forgotten something or missed something or failed at everything. He got up early, not because he had to, but because he could. He brewed a full pot of coffee in the common kitchen, not just a half cup from someone's leftover grounds. He actually tasted it this time, sat with it, let the quiet of the morning wrap around him like something sacred. In class, he raised his hand again, answered questions, not because he was trying to prove himself, but because he finally had the clarity to think. Assignments that used to take him twice as long, because of stress, fatigue, the constant static in his brain, suddenly felt doable, manageable. He could focus. He could breathe. He started showing up to labs early, stayed after to help classmates. His professors noticed, so did the other students. People began asking for his notes, his input, his help. He said yes. Because now he had something to give. At night, when the dorm was quiet, he let himself open the window and just sit there, watching the city breathe beneath him. Lights blinking, cars drifting by, life moving. He had been surviving for so long, he'd forgotten what it meant to imagine a future. But now, for the first time, he started to dream again, not just about making it, but about who he might become. It started small. A notebook left on a desk in the library with a post-it note. Heard you couldn't afford one, hope this helps. Nope. Then it was a meal swipe. He spotted a kid at the dining hall digging through his pockets, eyes scanning the menu like the price might change if he stared long enough. Noah waited until the cashier turned around, then scanned his own card before the guy could argue. Just pay it forward someday, he said, and disappeared into the crowd. Noah never made a big deal out of it. He didn't tell his friends. He didn't post about it. But the same instinct that once made him give away his last $1 now had room to breathe. He had a little extra, just enough to make small dents in someone else's storm. He found quiet ways to help. He started tutoring again, but this time, when a girl asked how much he charged, he just smiled and said, "Nothing, just bring snacks if you can." Some did, some couldn't. It didn't matter. He showed up anyway. When a classmate's laptop died mid-semester, Noah gave him an old one he'd bought secondhand last year and had planned to sell. "It still works," he said. "Just has a little personality." The guy cried. And then something strange started happening. Other students, ones who had seen him help or heard the stories passed from dorm to dorm, started doing it too. A girl left a new calculator in the library with a note taped to it. Someone else paid off a vending machine balance with a stack of quarters taped to the machine. Kindness had become contagious. Noah didn't expect to become a symbol, but word spread. His name, his story. Whispers started about the student who had given his last dollar to a stranger and how that stranger gave him his future. He didn't care about recognition, but every time he slipped another book into a struggling student's bag or watched someone walk away with a meal they hadn't expected, something inside him settled. The seed he'd planted in the cold with one small act of kindness had started to bloom, and now it was spreading. It started as a whisper. One student overheard a conversation outside the bursar's office. Another caught wind of it in the library between printer jams. By the end of the week, the question had spread across campus like wildfire. "Did you hear what happened to Noah Carter?" "No, what?" "Someone paid his entire tuition. All of it. 64 grand. "Who? Family?" "No." "That's the thing. No one knows." At first, Noah didn't notice. He was too busy catching up on sleep and homework and the feeling of not living in constant survival mode. But then came the stares, the half-smiles from people he didn't know, the occasional student who'd approach him hesitantly in the dining hall, eyes full of questions they didn't quite have the courage to ask. Eventually, someone posted about it on the campus message board. Just a sentence, vague but loaded. "To whoever paid Noah Carter's tuition, you're a legend." By the next day, it was trending locally. People speculated. Some said it was a rich alumni. Others guessed it was an anonymous tech billionaire or a professor who'd seen potential in Noah. A few thought he was lying, that it was some viral PR stunt, but most just wondered one thing. Who was E? Noah stayed quiet. He didn't want the attention. He hadn't asked for it, but the story had already outgrown him. It echoed through classrooms, dorms, late-night coffee shops. His name had become something larger than himself, synonymous with the kind of miracle people desperately wanted to believe still existed. Strangers started leaving notes in his locker. Some said thank you, even though he hadn't done anything for them directly. Others shared stories of struggle, asking how he'd found hope. A few just left drawings, hearts, open hands, a dollar bill folded into origami. Noah didn't know how to carry the weight of their wonder. It felt heavy, holy. But the question lingered like static in the air, in every hallway he walked, in every sideways glance he caught. Who paid Noah's tuition? And the answer, for now, was still wrapped in mystery. Just a single letter written in blue ink. E. The shelter smelled like dust, burnt coffee, and hand sanitizer. The kind of scent that clung to the walls and reminded you that you were somewhere in between struggle and hope. Noah had been volunteering here every Thursday evening for the past 2 months, mostly sorting supplies, folding clothes, passing out meals with a quiet smile and tired hands. He liked the work. It grounded him, reminded him that purpose wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was just being there, showing up. He was wiping down the serving table when the door opened. He barely glanced up. Another intake, maybe. Or someone here for a warm meal, a bed, a moment to breathe. Then he heard the voice at the check-in desk, soft, cautious, but steady. "I'm here to speak with whoever's in charge of volunteer coordination." There was something familiar in it, a cadence, a tremble laced with steel. Noah looked up, and for a moment the world tilted. She stood just inside the doorway, hair tucked neatly behind her ears, clean jeans, a navy coat pulled snug around her shoulders. Her posture was straighter now, no shaking, no hunched frame. She looked alive, present. The exhaustion that had clung to her like a second skin was gone, but her eyes, those same eyes that had met his on a freezing morning months ago, still held something unspoken. It was her, the woman from the sidewalk. She hadn't seen him yet. She was focused on the intake forms, speaking with the staff member behind the desk. Noah took a shaky step forward, his heart suddenly thudding like it had something to prove. He didn't know what he was going to say. He just knew he had to say something. "Excuse me," he said, voice barely above a whisper. She turned. Their eyes locked, time folded in on itself. She blinked, and he saw the exact moment recognition hit her. Her lips parted just slightly, breath catching like she'd been punched by memory. "You," she said softly, almost in disbelief. Noah nodded, unsure whether to smile or cry. She took a step toward him. "I've been trying to find you," she whispered, "for months." And just like that, the circle began to close. They sat across from each other in the break room of the shelter, 2 paper cups of lukewarm coffee between them, untouched. Outside, the rain tapped gently against the windows, like it was giving them space to speak. Noah didn't know what to say. He had imagined this moment more times than he could count, but now that it was here, his mind was blank. All he could do was stare at the woman who had once been collapsed on a curb, now composed, steady, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I never got your name," he said finally, his voice softer than usual. She gave him a small, almost shy smile. "Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Bradford." Noah blinked. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. "I used to run a corporate consulting firm," she continued. 20 years in the game, fast cars, big numbers. People listened when I walked into a room." She paused, eyes flickering toward the window, like she could still see the version of herself that once existed. "And then my son died." The words landed like a stone in Noah's chest. No preamble, no gentle segue. Just the truth, raw and unfiltered. "I was on a conference call when I got the call from the hospital," she said, her voice steady, but her hands now trembling around the cup. "A seizure, out of nowhere." He was 15. Noah opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say that could carry the weight of that sentence. "I unraveled after that, quit everything, lost the company, lost the house. Friends stopped calling. Family thought I was unstable." She looked down. Maybe I was. Noah swallowed, his throat tight. "I didn't want to be here anymore," Eleanor whispered. "I hadn't spoken to anyone in days. That morning I was going to walk into traffic. I had it all planned out." She looked up, eyes glassy. "And then you stopped. And you gave me $1 and half a cup of cold coffee, and you looked at me like I mattered, like I was still a person." She paused, then added, "That moment didn't save me, but it reminded me that I was still worth saving." Noah felt something break inside his chest. He had spent so long wondering if that moment meant anything at all, and now he knew. It meant everything. Noah sat frozen, his hands wrapped tightly around his coffee cup, though he hadn't taken a sip. Across from him, Eleanor spoke, not drama, not with performance, but with a quiet, brutal honesty that made her words land like thunder in a still room. "I didn't go home that day," she said. "I went straight to a clinic." He blinked, startled. "A clinic? For depression, suicidal ideation, trauma. Whatever label you want to stick on the box." Her voice didn't shake, but there was an edge to it, like someone who had spent years fighting just to sit calmly in their own skin. "They kept me for 72 hours. I begged them to let me leave after 2. They didn't." Noah didn't interrupt. Something told him she hadn't said these words out loud to anyone before. And now that they were out, they spilled like a river after the dam broke. "I hated every second of it," she admitted. "The walls, the sterile lighting, the forced group therapy." She gave a soft, bitter laugh. "But I stayed because of you." He met her eyes then. They were damp but clear, sharper than they'd been the day he met her on the curb. "You looked at me like I was a person that day, just human." No one had done that in a long time. She drew a shaky breath. You said someone once helped you, and you were just paying it forward. I thought about that line every single day I was in there." Noah felt his chest tighten. It hadn't felt like much, what he'd done. $1, a coffee, a moment. "But it was everything," Eleanor continued. "When I got out, I started over, cleaned myself up, found work again. Nothing like before, but enough. Got a place, started seeing a therapist regularly, rebuilt slowly." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, and I kept asking myself, how do I thank someone who doesn't even know what they did? She slid the paper across the table. Noah opened it. A copy of the check. "You saved my life first," she said. And Noah, for the first time in his life, had no idea how to say thank you. Eleanor folded her hands, gaze steady, voice clear in a way that made Noah sit up straighter without realizing it. "I've been thinking about it for a while," she said. "What to do with this second chance? With the time you gave back to me." Noah shook his head gently. "You didn't owe me anything." She smiled, but there was no amusement behind it, just depth. "It's not about owing. It's about honoring." He stayed quiet, unsure where this was going, but the gravity in her tone made the air feel charged, like something important was about to shift. "I want to start a fund," she said. "A scholarship. Not the kind for straight-A students with resumes full of clubs and internships. The kind for students like you." Noah blinked. "Like me?" She nodded. "The ones working 2 or 3 jobs just to scrape by. The ones skipping meals so they can afford textbooks. The ones who fall through the cracks because they're too tired to ask for help. The quiet fighters." Noah looked down, fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "There are a lot of us." "I know," she said. "That's why I want to start with you." He looked up. "I want to call it the Last Dollar Fund," Eleanor continued, her voice catching just slightly. "Because that's what you gave me, your last dollar. And because sometimes that's all someone needs. One last dollar, one last gesture, one last bit of faith to believe they can keep going." The room went still. The hum of the shelter, the distant clatter of trays, the rain against the window, it all faded into the background. Noah felt something rise in his chest. A knot of disbelief, of emotion, of memory. "You'd really do that?" he asked quietly. "Name it after that?" "I already have the paperwork started," she said, "and I want you involved. I want this to be yours as much as mine. Your story is the seed." He didn't know what to say. A lump caught in his throat and refused to move. Eleanor leaned forward. "You changed my life, Noah. Let's change a few more." The first reporter showed up with nothing but a notepad and a cheap camera crew. A local news affiliate, Channel 9, the kind that usually covered high school football games and weather updates. Noah agreed, reluctantly. Just one interview, he told himself. Just a few minutes to talk about the scholarship fund. He wore his cleanest button-down and sat awkwardly in a plastic chair in the shelter's common room while they adjusted the lighting. But the questions didn't stay on the fund. How did it feel to give your last dollar to a stranger? What were you thinking in that moment? Did you ever imagine it would come back to you like this? Noah tried to answer honestly, tried not to shrink under the camera's gaze. He talked about hunger, about pride, about how it hurts to ask for help even when you need it most. He talked about how small kindness can echo in ways you never see coming. He didn't cry, not on camera. But his voice cracked when he said, "I didn't think anyone noticed me back then. I just didn't want her to feel like that too." By the time the segment aired, it had been trimmed into a 2-minute clip with soft piano music and a pull quote at the end. He gave her his last dollar. She gave him a future. It blew up overnight. The video was shared on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Within hours, it had been reposted by influencers, community groups, national pages. Comments poured in by the thousands. "You remind me why people matter. I showed this to my son, and we cried together. I was ready to give up. This changed something in me. I gave my last $5 today in your honor." Noah didn't know how to process it. He wasn't used to attention, wasn't used to strangers thanking him for things that still felt to him like the bare minimum of decency. But he watched the ripple effect grow. Emails from students asking how to apply for the Last Dollar Fund, messages from parents who wanted to donate, schools reaching out to replicate the idea. Noah Carter, the invisible kid with the hollow stomach and bouncing rent checks, was now a symbol, not of charity, not of pity, but of what can happen when someone refuses to walk past a person in pain and chooses instead to see them. Noah's phone rang just past midnight. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, scrolling through hundreds of messages he still hadn't replied to, heart heavy with gratitude and disbelief. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't seen in weeks, not because they were estranged, but because life had stretched them thin. Mom. He stared at it for a second, then picked up. "Hey," he said, voice quiet. There was a pause on the other end, then a choked inhale. "Noah!" Her voice cracked. It had been steady his whole life, even when everything around them fell apart, through eviction notices, empty refrigerators, and nights spent huddled under blankets because the heat had been shut off again. But now it was trembling. "I just saw the story," she whispered. "Someone sent it to me on Facebook. I didn't even know—" She trailed off. He could hear her trying to breathe through it. "Why didn't you tell me?" He rubbed a hand over his eyes. "I didn't want you to worry." "I always worry," she said, almost laughing, but it broke into a sob. Noah felt a lump rise in his throat. "You've always had such a big heart," she continued, her words coming fast now, like if she stopped she might shatter. "Even when you were little. You used to give your lunch to the kid next door who never brought one. I remember telling you that the world would eat you alive if you weren't careful." He remembered, too. She'd said it after he came home crying in 3rd grade because he'd stood up to a bully and gotten pushed into the mud for it. "I was wrong," she said. He blinked, caught off guard. "You didn't let the world eat you, Noah. You changed it. You fought for your place. And when you had nothing left, you still gave. And someone saw that. Someone gave it back to you." Her voice cracked again. "You've made me so proud, baby, so proud." Noah pressed the phone tighter to his ear, tears sliding down his cheek, quiet and warm. For a long time neither of them spoke. But for the first time in years, they didn't need to. The emails came in one after another, flooding his inbox with subject lines that didn't seem real. "Opportunity to join our mission-driven team. We saw your story. Let's talk. We're inspired. Let's work together." At first, Noah thought they were spam, some kind of phishing scam piggybacking off the story, but then he recognized logos, real companies, non-profits with national reach, universities offering fellowships, startups asking if he'd consider being the face of a new education initiative. Some included salary numbers that made his chest tighten. Others offered relocation packages, speaking engagements, mentorship tracks. People wanted him. Not just for his grades, not for his resume, for who he was. And that was new. He sat at his desk in the quiet of his dorm room, the soft blue glow of his laptop screen painting his face, unread emails stacking in the corner. His name was trending online, linked with phrases like "the heart of hope" and "a new kind of leader." But none of it answered the question that had begun to gnaw at him. What do I actually want? He thought of his mother's voice the night she called, of the shelter, the faces he saw every Thursday night, the kids in the tutoring sessions who still brought their own notebooks even when he said not to worry about supplies. He thought of Eleanor, her hands trembling as she slid the check across the table. Of the corner where it all began, where a crumpled dollar changed 2 lives at once. The world was offering him everything, but he wasn't sure if he wanted it. Part of him craved stability, health insurance, a salary, a desk he could call his own. Another part wanted to run, to build something from the ground up, to chase impact, not income. He leaned back in his chair, stared at the ceiling, and exhaled. He could say yes to any of them, But he didn't want to make a decision based on who saw potential in him. He wanted to choose a path where he saw potential in himself. And that meant waiting, thinking, listening to the voice that got him here in the first place, the one that always whispered, "Do what matters," even when no one's watching. It was colder than he remembered. The wind had picked up since morning, cutting down the street in bitter gusts, but Noah barely noticed. He stood at the corner of 12th and Marlowe, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes locked on the patch of sidewalk where it had all started. The curb was chipped now, more weathered than he remembered, and a fresh crack ran through the pavement just beneath the lamppost. But everything else looked the same. The coffee shop across the street still had its crooked "open" sign hanging in the window. A barista inside laughed at something a customer said, steam clouding the glass. A couple of students rushed past Noah, bundled in scarves and heavy backpacks, lost in their own conversations. No one looked twice at him. He liked it that way. He took a slow step toward the exact spot where she had sat, legs pulled in, head in her hands, shivering in a threadbare cardigan. He could still see her there, like a ghost, fragile, distant, ready to disappear. He lowered himself onto the curb and sat. The world moved around him, loud and indifferent, but here, it was quiet. He hadn't come for closure or answers. He just needed to be here, to remember, to remind himself that this, everything, had once hinged on a moment so small it could have been ignored. $1, a coffee, a choice. He pulled a folded note from his coat pocket, one he'd written the night before but hadn't known what to do with. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It didn't need to be. It simply said, "Sometimes the smallest thing we do becomes the biggest thing someone else remembers." He unfolded it, smoothed it out on his knee, then laid it gently on the sidewalk. No tape, no marker. Just left it there for the wind or a stranger or time itself to carry away. He sat for a while longer, let the cold seep in, let the memory settle. And when he finally stood, he didn't look back. He just walked forward, quiet, certain, and a little more whole than when he arrived. Noah sat at the edge of the bed, laptop open, cursor blinking on an unread email. The offer letter stared back at him like a challenge. $92,000 starting salary, full benefits, relocation package. It was more than he ever thought he'd see on paper, more than anyone in his family had ever made in a year. He'd read it 4 times already, memorized the bullet points, the praise, the promises. But it didn't feel like his. Behind him, the desk was cluttered with printouts of the last dollar fund, draft bylaws, early applicant lists, Eleanor's scribbled notes on napkins and envelopes. She called them their blueprints for something real, something that could outlast both of them. He stared at the job offer again, then he closed the laptop. The next morning he met Eleanor at the shelter. She was sorting through supply boxes, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, exactly as she had been the day he found her again. She didn't look like a CEO or a philanthropist. She looked like someone who understood what broken felt like and was determined to build something for people trying to crawl out of it. He walked up beside her, holding a single sheet of paper, the job offer printed and folded once. She raised an eyebrow when she saw it. "Big one. Very," he said. "And?" He tore it in half, then in half again, and dropped the pieces in the trash. Eleanor's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. "I want to do this," Noah said. "For real. Not as a face on a brochure, not as a story people share online. I want to build this with you from the ground up." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked them clear. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "More sure than I've ever been." There were no cameras, no headlines, just 2 people standing in a room filled with boxes and hope. He could have had comfort, prestige, a title. Instead, he chose purpose. Because he knew what it meant to be on the edge, and now he was going to make sure fewer people had to stand there alone. The envelope sat on the desk in front of her, untouched. Across the table, Noah watched as the freshman stared at it like it might explode. Her name was Ava Mitchell, first generation, just like him. Her file had been the first Eleanor slid across the table when they launched the Last Dollar Fund. GPA solid, work history stacked, recommendation letters that read like cries for help between the lines. But what stopped him cold was the budget worksheet she'd submitted. She'd been surviving on instant noodles, skipping class to work double shifts, sharing textbooks through group chats. Every margin in her life had already been pushed to the edge. She was right where he'd been not that long ago, just one unexpected bill away from breaking. "Go ahead," Noah said gently, nodding at the envelope. "It's for you." Ava swallowed, her hands trembling slightly as she peeled it open. She didn't read the letter aloud, just scanned it with wide eyes. Then she blinked, and blinked again. "It's paid?" she whispered. Noah nodded. "All of it, this semester, books, fees. You're covered." She stared at him, eyes starting to fill. "But why me?" He smiled, small but certain. "Because someone once looked at me and saw more than my circumstances. Because you deserve a shot at breathing without a weight on your chest. That's what this is." Tears welled in her eyes, and she shook her head, overwhelmed. "You don't even know me." "I didn't know her either," Noah said quietly. Ava's hands covered her face, shoulders trembling with a soundless cry. She wasn't used to good things arriving without strings, wasn't used to being told she was worthy of help, not because she begged for it, but because someone believed she shouldn't have to. Noah stood and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to pay it back," he said. "Just remember this feeling, and one day, when you can, give someone else the same chance." She looked up at him, mascara smudged, hope flickering behind tears, and in that moment he saw his own reflection in her pain, and more importantly, in her relief. The circle had started again. The lights in the banquet hall glowed low and warm, casting everything in gold. Strings of soft music floated above the chatter of hundreds of guests dressed in black and silver, clinking glasses, exchanging handshakes and stories. There were no velvet ropes, no VIP sections. Everyone in the room had earned their place through grit, generosity, or survival. Many through all three. At the center of it stood Noah, his tie slightly crooked, fingers tugging at the collar of a borrowed suit. He never imagined himself at an event like this, let alone one built on his name. But here he was, standing beneath a banner that read, "The Last Dollar Fund, a celebration of second chances," watching lives shift in real time. Eleanor approached from the side, a vision of grace in navy blue, her hair pinned back, but not so tight that it didn't feel like her. She smiled when she saw him, the kind of smile that held weight, history, and quiet pride. "You did it," she said, offering him a glass of sparkling cider. Noah shook his head, lips curled in disbelief. "We did it." The ballroom quieted as the MC called for attention. A hush fell over the crowd, and all eyes turned to the stage where Eleanor now stood, microphone in hand. She didn't speak immediately, just scanned the faces before her, the students, the donors, the mentors, the once hopeless now standing tall. "When this started," she began, voice steady, "it was just one moment. One stranger giving what little he had to someone who had nothing left. No camera, no recognition, just a gesture, small, but full of grace." She looked toward Noah, and he felt the room fade around him. "That moment saved my life," she said. "And tonight, we stand here not because of money, not because of headline, but because of what kindness looks like when it keeps going, when it multiplies." She raised her glass. "To the smallest acts and the greatest hearts, may we never underestimate either." The crowd echoed her words in quiet unison, glasses raised, eyes shining. Noah didn't speak, he didn't need to. The circle was whole, and for the first time in a long time he felt it, not just in his chest, but in the room around him. Hope. Alive. Shared. Real. The screen fades to a soft, quiet image. just a sidewalk still cracked, with a single folded note resting at the edge of the curb. Wind nudges it gently as a piano hums in the background, each note falling like a heartbeat. Noah's voice enters, low, steady, and full of reflection. I gave her $1. The image shifts, flashbacks in warm, faded tones. A younger version of Noah, hunched in a hoodie, holding out a coffee cup. A woman on a curb, eyes hollow, the moment their hands almost touched. She gave me a future. Now we see him again, but different. Standing in front of a classroom, helping a student with a backpack, too worn to hold together. Delivering a speech behind a podium, awkward in a suit but glowing with quiet confidence. But the truth is, we gave each other something far more powerful. Cut to Eleanor standing at the shelter, her arm around a girl barely holding herself together. A box of donated coats beside her. She's not just better. She's whole, living, leading. Faith in people. There's footage of students laughing, hugging, tearing open envelopes marked Last Dollar Fund. There's a boy clutching a check like it's a lifeline, a girl crying into the shoulder of a stranger who just handed her her future. And a second chance. The screen fades to the gala again. Noah and Eleanor on stage, the crowd aglow in soft light, everyone standing, glasses raised. To believe that kindness still matters. The music swells, not dramatically but full of heart. The camera pulls back, the sidewalk again. Empty now, quiet, but somehow full, like a sacred memory that doesn't need words to stay alive. The final image, a dollar bill tucked into a student's binder next to a note scribbled in messy pen. For when you think no one sees you, we do. Fade to black. Noah's voice one last time. It's not about changing the whole world, just someone's world, for a moment. That's all it takes. And then silence. Hope hanging there, asking the viewer to carry it forward.